Honeycrisp. The Honeycrisp was developed at the University of Minnesota, which has been breeding cold hard candy apples for over a century. It was the result of a cross made in 1960 using an apple called Keepsake Apple with an experimental breeding apple known as MN 101627. But for a while, the university actually assumed the cross had failed. The original records were lost, and the seedling that would become Honeycrisp almost got discarded entirely. It survived almost by accident, sitting quietly in a test orchard while researchers paid attention to other more promising-looking varieties. The cells in a Honeycrisp are actually larger than in most other apples, so when you bite into one, those cells burst rather than compress, releasing a lot of juice and a loud crunch. The texture is firm but not hard. It's crisp without being dry. The flavor is usually sweet like honey with a little bit of tartness, although some lower quality apples can taste watery or bland. Honeycrisp used to be extremely popular in the US, and at its peak retail price, it was selling for 3 to 4 times the price of standard apples. The patent on the variety has now expired, which means anyone can grow it. But the difficulty of cultivation keeps supply tight enough that it remains a premium product at most grocery stores. Granny Smith. The Granny Smith apple is a good example of a chance seedling, meaning it grew by accident from a seed of unknown parentage. It was discovered in Australia in the 1860s on the property of Maria Ann Smith, an older woman who found the young tree growing in a pile of compost or rubbish. People believe the seeds may have come from a French crab apple she threw away, which could explain why Granny Smiths are so sour and firm. Mrs. Smith noticed the apple was very useful. It tasted refreshing when eaten fresh and also worked well for cooking because it kept its shape when heated. She began propagating and selling the variety locally, and it gained regional popularity after her death when orchardists in New South Wales started growing it commercially. Today, Granny Smith is grown almost everywhere, and it's one of the top 5 most widely grown apple varieties in the world. The flavor is very tangy with an almost sharp citrus-like acidity. The sweetness is minimal, which is unusual for an apple. The flesh is dense, crisp, and very juicy. And its high acidity also makes it one of the apples least likely to brown quickly after being cut, which is why it shows up often in fruit platters and salads. Pink Pearl. The pink pearl has a bright pink to red flesh hidden under a fairly plain outside. It was developed in 1944 by a California plant treater named Albert Eder. The apple comes from an older red-fledged variety called Surprise Apple, which originally came from Turkey. Eder was a largely self-taught plant treater who spent much of his life in the remote area of Edersburg, California, where he experimented with breeding apples that had unusual colors and complex flavors. The pink color comes from natural pigments called anthocyanins, the same antioxidants found in berries. In most apples, these pigments are limited to the skin, but in a few varieties like the pink pearl, they also develop in the flesh itself. The flavor is usually tart and bright, with some people saying it tastes a bit like grapefruit or raspberry. The texture can be a little softer than many modern commercial apples. Black Oxford. This apple was first found around 1790 on the farm of a man named Valentine in Oxford County, Maine. For many families in New England, black Oxford apples were a very important winter food, and people stored them in cool cellars so they could still eat fresh fruit months after the harvest season ended. The skin is very dark, ranging from deep purple to almost black when fully ripe, and the flesh inside is white to cream-colored with a fine, dense grain. The flavor is sweet and mild with a subtle wine taste. The texture is firm and the skin is very thick. While many modern apples might only last a few weeks, black Oxfords can stay good for more than 6 months in the right conditions. Fuji. The Fuji apple was developed in Japan in the 1930s by Japanese researchers who crossed 2 American varieties, the RS Janet and Red Delicious. The Fuji was officially released in Japan in 1962, and it's named after the town of Fujisaki. Fuji apples grown in Japan are often individually wrapped in paper bags while still on the tree to protect them from insects and UV damage, which produce a more uniform skin color. The variety is known for its sweetness, which is often higher than many other apples. Sometimes Fuji apples develop something called water core. This happens when the fruit fills with a sugar called sorbitol, making parts of the apple look slightly clear and taste extremely sweet, almost like honey. Some growers see this as a flaw because it shortens storage life, but many think it makes the apple even better. Fuji apples stored in a standard refrigerator will stay crisp for months, which is exceptional compared to most varieties. Anani's Rennet. The Anani's Rennet, sometimes called the pineapple rennet, is a small yellow apple that is grown in European orchards for hundreds of years. It most likely originated in the Netherlands around the 1500s from a cross between the old apple Golden Harvey and other unknown apple. When you bite into it, the taste is sharp and lively with strong notes that people often compare to pineapple, lemon, and pear. The sour kick makes it stand out from many modern supermarket apples that are mostly sweet. If the apples are stored for a while, the sharp acidity softens, and the pineapple-like aroma becomes stronger. It can also add extra flavor to cider and works well in desserts, where its mix of sugar and acidity gives the dish more depth. The flesh is juicy and fairly fine in texture, making it popular with people who like strong flavors rather than large fruit. Knobbed russet. The knobbed russet is often called the ugliest apple in existence. It's also one of the oldest known cultivated apple varieties still surviving today. The skin is rough and uneven, covered in gray russet patches, bumps, and lumps. But inside, the flesh is actually very crisp, rich, and sweet with a slightly nutty pearl-like flavor. The skin is a natural corky layer that often forms on older apple varieties. Many big supermarkets avoid selling these apples because the skin doesn't look smooth. It survives through the work of organizations like the Brogdale Collections in Kent, which maintains the National Fruit Collection, the largest collection of fruit varieties in the world. Red Delicious. The Red Delicious is probably the most recognized apple in the world. It was first discovered as a chance seedling on the Iowa farm of Jesse Hyatt in the 1870s. During the 1900s, growers kept breeding the apple to make its deep red color stronger and its five-pointed shape more noticeable, so it stood down in grocery stores. Farmers chose thicker skin and firmer flesh, so the apples could be shipped long distances and stored for months. Because of this, many modern Red Delicious apples have tough, slightly bitter skin, and the flesh inside had become mealy, dry, and flavorless, stripped of the acidity and depth that had made the original appealing. Still, when it's fully ripe, it can be crisp and refreshing with light floral and melon-like flavors. Kandil Sinap. This is a Turkish variety that used to be very popular in the Ottoman Empire, and nearly disappeared in 1944 when Stalin exiled the Tartar population from Ca. It comes from the Sinap region of northern Turkey along the Black Sea coast. Sinap is a Turkish word that refers to a group of elongated apple varieties grown across Turkey and parts of the former Ottoman world. Kandil refers to an oil lamp or candle, a reference to the tall and narrow shape of the apple. It was grown extensively in imperial Ottoman gardens, and was reportedly a favored variety of the Ottoman court during the height of the empire. Ottoman manuscripts from the 17th and 18th centuries mention it by name and describe it as among the finest dessert apples available. When European travelers and botanists passed through Istanbul and Anatolia, they often documented it, and some attempts were made to introduce it into Western European orchards with limited lasting success. The flavor is delicate, sweet, and aromatic with a fine texture and a juice that is notable for its clarity and gentleness. It lacks the aggressive acidity of many Western European apple varieties. The flavor is often described as mild but complex. Gala. The Gala was developed in New Zealand in the 1930s by orchardist J.H. Kidd, who was one of the most important apple breeders of the 20th century. Kidd crossed Kidd's Orange Red, his own earlier creation, with Golden Delicious, and the result was eventually named Gala by Kidd's son-in-law, who named it after a royal visit by Queen Elizabeth II. The name reflected his view that it was fit for a gala occasion. It began reaching international markets in the 1970s and became popular quickly in the UK. In the US, it built steadily through the 1990s and eventually surpassed Red Delicious in production volume around 2018, reflecting a serious change in consumer preferences. Gala is medium-sized with a yellow-orange background and orange-red stripes. The skin is thin, the flesh is cream-colored and crisp, and the texture is very satisfying and punchy. The flavor is sweet and mild with low acidity. Most Gala apples sold today are actually sub-varieties such as Royal Gala, Galaxy, Brookfield, or Regal. Royal Gala, the most widely grown sport, has deeper red coloring than the original, and has become so common that most people just call it Gala. The original Gala with its striped appearance is now harder to find than the sports derived from it. Arkansas Black. This variety is a classic American apple that was first found in Benton County, Arkansas around the early 1900s when the Ozarks, where it was grown, were one of the top apple growing regions in the U.S. Moth infestations and the Great Depression almost wiped it out, but it survived and is now a rare apple treasured by chefs and cider makers. The color is very dark, almost purplish red that deepens to near black on the sunny side of the fruit. It has a waxy, polished surface that picks up a gloss almost like lacquered wood. The flesh is pale yellow, very dense, and extremely firm. Firmer than almost any other commonly grown apple variety. It's genuinely hard in a way that can surprise you. Biting into a freshly harvested Arkansas Black feels like biting into a very firm pear or quint. At harvest in late October, the flavor is sharp and astringent with a bold tartness. It's not pleasant to eat off the tree, but if left in a cool cellar from October until January or February, the flesh softens slightly. The tannins mellow, the acidity rounds out, and a unique flavor is created that has notes of anise, dark cherry, spice, and wine. The apple essentially ages like cheese. It develops character through the process of cell breakdown and flavor concentration, the same process that makes mellow fruits edible. This makes it very good for cider and cooking. Grainstein. The Gravenstein is one of the oldest and most historically significant apples grown in the Western world. Its exact origin is debated. The most commonly cited theory traces it to Gråsten in what is now southern Denmark. The name Gravenstein is the German rendering of Gråsten, which means gray stone. The variety was well known in northern Germany and Scandinavia by the early 18th century, and it spread rapidly through Europe and then to North America as apple cultivation expanded. Russian fur traders later brought it to the west coast of North America and planted one at Fort Ross, California in 1811. The apple is medium to large and slightly lopsided with a yellowish-green skin covered in orange stripes and sometimes a faint resetting. It looks rustic and uneven. The taste is tart and fruity with a strong smell. Gravenstein is considered a good sauce apple, and Martinelli's, the famous apple juice company, built much of its early reputation on Gravenstein juice from California. Needsgunna. This one is a species of wild apple native to the mountainous regions of Central Asia, and is possibly the most influential ancestor of all modern red-fledged apples. Almost every part of its tree is red or purple. The flowers are deep crimson, the leaves are reddish-purple, the bark is reddish, and the flesh of the fruit is red from skin to core. It is one of only a small number of apple species where the anthocyanin pigments penetrate every tissue of the tree, not just the fruit skin. This pigmentation is the source of a large percentage of the red-fleshed and red-skinned apple varieties that exist today. The fruit itself is small, astringent, and not very pleasant to eat fresh. Its value is mostly genetic and scientific. Calvo Blanc du. This apple has been considered the finest apple in France for roughly 400 years, and it's the variety required by tradition for the classic tartatin. It is known for being very uneven and lumpy with lows at the bottom that make it look a bit misshapen. The skin is pale greenish-white to yellow-white, sometimes with a faint pinkish blush on the sun-exposed side. The Calvo Blanc has an exceptionally high acid content combined with a rich complex sweetness with an aromatic quality that has been described as wine-like, honeyed, and faintly spicy. There is a depth and density of flavor that is unusual even among top dessert apples. It's an apple that continues to reveal itself as you eat it, rather than delivering a single immediate impression. It's also one of the highest known sources of vitamin C in any apple variety, containing roughly 4 to 5 times the vitamin C of a typical commercial apple, and it was reportedly used in France as a remedy for scurvy before the connection to vitamin C was understood. Aesopus Spitzenberg. The Aesopus Spitzenberg was first found in the early 1700s in Ipius in New York. It was also the favorite apple of Thomas Jefferson, who planted the trees at his home, Monticello. It was grown extensively throughout the Hudson Valley and into New England through the 18th and 19th centuries, and was considered for a long period the best American apple for dessert eating. It has a strong flavor experience. The first bite gives a big crunch and a burst of juice with a very sweet but also sharply tart. It feels bold and lively. Many people say it has a spicy flavor with hints of cinnamon, clove, and nutmeg. Some people even notice notes of strawberry, guava, or a floral taste in the skin. The flesh is firm and dense with a slightly chewy texture instead of the soft grainy texture some apples have. The variety is popular for serves and desserts, but is hard to grow because the trees can get diseases easily and need the right climate. So, they are not common in large commercial orchards. Today, you can sometimes still find these apples at small orchards or farmers' markets. Rubinette. The Rubinette is a Swiss apple that is often considered to be among the best-tasting apples in the world. It was bred in Switzerland by Walter Hohenstein in the 1950s and released commercially in 1966. His goal was to combine the reliable growing qualities of the Golden Delicious with the rich flavor of the English Cox's Orange Pippin. The Rubinette kept the complex aroma of the Cox's apple, but added extra sweetness and richness. The apple is usually small to medium in size with a yellow base color overlaid with orange and dull red streaks. The skin is thin, but the taste is strong and honey-like, both sweet and slightly sharp at the same time. Some people say it has hints of pear candy, vanilla, and even almond. Many apple experts think it has one of the best sugar-to-acid balances of any apple grown today. Growing it is very difficult because the trees grow weakly and are prone to diseases like apple scab. Farmers often have to thin the blossoms heavily, so the tree produces only one apple per cluster and give the trees a lot of attention.